All right, we're going to head on down into our first feature match here of the day. We have FF Freak, which is Brad Nelson, versus The Standard here.
Oh, nice. Good name for this tournament, that's for
Good
sure.
names, too. Looks like we've got The Standard on the play up top. Very, very quick keep there. We'll see what Brad does with this hand here. Looks like probably an easy keep for Brad as well.
Yeah, Brad's looks pretty good. Gosh, Essence Scatter being like a card you have to respect in this format is such a tilt.
Yeah, it's weird because we haven't like previously we had Essence Capture, which was blue, which was
Yeah,
kind of prohibitive in terms of casting for some of these decks.
yeah, yeah. I agree. Essence Scatter is a card like that. I'm like, is this playable? But it's certainly playable. I mean, this format is mostly about creatures, and Essence Scatter is pretty easy to cast.
Yep. They have here some scry decisions on the Sphinx here, bottoming the second. Bunker Giant makes sense. Love to see the Teferi get a nice 2-3-4 curve here with the stomp potentially.
Yeah, it looks really nice there for the standard. They got some triomes going on too.
Remember,
All
this
right.
is an open deck list tournament, so these players are aware of what their opponent are playing. So the standard is probably aware that this Bone Crusher Giant is kind of dead in this matchup. Would not be surprised to see just a stomp go to the dome here on this turn 2 end step.
Yeah, yeah, I'm with you. You want to just get a little bit of value out of it.
Yep. Excellent. And I think we'd probably see this even in a closed deck list event. Like once you see the start from the opponent, like maybe you're worried about a Risen Reef, but here you know that that's not the case, and it's just safe to fire this off and start getting pressure going.
Yeah, even if they put a Riz Reef down, like you have to Fairy to cover it the next turn if you need to. I mean, I assume this is going to plus here. It could go either way, but
Yep. We get Teferi down, and we see Brad with the dispute and the opt. So opt
yeah,
first here. It's like
yeah,
bottom
really
to
nice for Brad. He's got as you mentioned the Mystical Dispute in the main deck as well. Essence Scatter and Mystical Dispute in the main deck is kind of like a strange push pull, but it makes total sense in this format.
yeah. I mean, in a way, this Temur Reclamation deck is a control deck, right? Like it is a
Yep.
Temur control deck.
Yeah, basically the only thing you want to be doing is buying yourself time. And I mean, Blast Zone helps with that. Uro helps with that. All you need is time, and you go so comically over the top of every other deck in the format, it doesn't really matter. So, Brad, you're going to stick Blast Zone down too. Blast Zone got me pretty good last night. I was playing some, I mentioned I was playing some of the Sacrifice deck, and, it's like mono one drops, especially when you play um, the version that I'm playing. There's just like infinite one drops. So Blast Zone's a pretty nice one here.
So who do you think is the beatdown in this matchup with the Temur Fire or the Jeskai Fires versus the Reclamation deck?
Yeah, that's a good question. You always want to assess your role, and I think the Fires deck is almost certainly the beatdown deck here. I mentioned that the Rec deck just goes like comically over the top. You got to kill them before they start to chain explosion to explosion on you.
Yeah, once the first explosion kind of hits for like that 4+5+, they're gonna hit the next one and then close the game out really quickly. Like the
Yeah,
first explosion for 4 or 5 is often gonna find another reclamation and then quickly another expansion explosion with your cantrips.
yeah, I'm totally with you. The onus is definitely on the standard here.
See Brad here
Alrighty.
trying to figure out his sequencing, debating on which land drop it looks like.
Yeah, it looks like that. It looks like he's kind of in the middle of like, do I play Uro? Do I play Reclamation? Like, what's the best way
I
to survive these turns?
I'd assume he wants to lead on the Fabled Passage if he's going to be scrying with the Opt because you don't want to be shuffling back in if you're scrying to the bottom. And, like, it's pretty marginal either way. Looks like Brad's going to
Yeah,
decide not to do that.
comes Opt.
Okay, and there's that first expansion explosion there. Now, notably,
Yep.
even though explosion has red in its mana cost, because of the way Wilderness Reclamation works, you can float that mana, so you can make red effectively off of a single red source.
Yeah, Brad's in a pretty good position here. We mentioned Essence Scatter being a player, and Uro's going to buy back some of the life that he's going to take a couple hits off the Sphinx of Foresight, but Brad looks like he's in pretty good shape here.
Now, as far as everything else is concerned, does okay? So it looks like deck lists are currently a little bit messed up on the Stream Decker. It looks like everything's lumped together. I was gonna say, do we have main deck counterspells on the Jeskai Fire player side? We're gonna get that fixed here in just a minute. Companions are they just cause issues everywhere, chat.
Man,
Everything just needs extra support.
we had issues on the Nerd Rage website of like, how do we lay these out? And it's like complete disaster. So, all right, well,
So
see if this Bone Crusher sticks.
Yeah, and like so. One of the interesting things, the dynamic about the companion is like Brad knows that there's another creature, right? Like it's not even speculative.
Yeah.
Like it's not if I save this scatter, do they have something? Like the standard
Correct.
is guaranteed to have this Kruga if we scatter this.
Yeah, and Brad's gonna let it go, and I think that's totally fine. He's got expansion to deal with one of these, and again he has Uro like just looming. So.
Yep, and we see the blast zone ticking up here. Maybe we're going to see that potentially take care of the Bone Crusher Giant. Would be surprised if it took care of the Sphinx because it does blow everything on 4, and that would also take out the Reclamation, so that's pretty unlikely. One real consideration if he does intend to use the blast zone to kill these 3 drops is we're probably going to see that happen before the Uro comes into play.
Yeah, I think, and yeah, Brad's in pretty good shape. The blast zone is the least painful way to take care of the Bone Crusher Giant.
Okay, and we see the Uro coming into play here, so maybe this is a sign that like this blast zone is doing something else.
Could be. It's also just like can stick, and like you have to deal with it if you're the standard here in the next couple turns.
We see Shark Typhoon in hand for both players. What do you think about this one, Maddie?
This card is really good. It was pretty underrated in the beginning, and I mean, the most natural applications people thought was like, okay, well this kills Teferi, which is very valid. It has a hidden mode where it also costs 6 mana, and you basically can not lose the game from there if the game goes super long. I think this card's really good.
Yeah, it's one of the really interesting dynamics about this card is we often talk about cards having like a hidden mode and a primary mode, and with Shark Typhoon, I agree with you that like actually casting this as the enchantment is kind of like the hidden mode. That's not the reason you're putting Shark Typhoons in your deck. You're using it for, like we see here with Brad, floating his mana with his Reclamation and then making that instant speed 4/4.
Yeah, and Brad's in a really dominating position here from that. I mean, both players are 18. I mentioned that, you asked me earlier who's the beatdown. Like, Jeskai Fire is the beatdown here, and they haven't done anything basically.
Yep, yeah,
and stomp.
And like you pointed out earlier, the Uro just keeping Brad's life total very high, kind of preventing that aggression from the Fire's deck from being possible.
Yeah, and I mean this Essence Scatter is a complete massacre on the Karuga, and Brad has another Uro, he has Explosion hanging out. Brad's in really great shape here.
Yeah, you'll notice too, like if we talk about, these decks are named after certain cards, and like there's no Fires of Invention in sight for the standard, whereas like Brad's had his Reclamation down, and like having the extra mana on one side of the board really allows that player to pull ahead.
Yeah, I definitely don't like the position, at least in the pre-board configuration from what I see. Brad's deck is so tuned to beat these. I mean, he's got multiple Mystical Disputes. He's got Essence Scatters. I mean, he's got the goods to get around these Jeskai Fires decks.
Yep, yeah. Having played a bunch on the ladder this week, the Jeskai Fires deck really kind of feels like the end boss for a lot of the aggro and mid-range decks in the format, but Temur Reclamation is able to just go so far over the top.
Yeah, it's outrageous. It just goes way over the top.
I like this defensive block here from the standard. Then you take this Uro out of play. Brad's graveyard is relatively empty. I believe there's only the Essence Scatter in there. So if the standard is able to get this off the board, they can.
Yeah.
Now
I think there's 2 total.
That being said, we have an Explosion for 3 here from Brad potentially, right? So could have blown out that combat step a little bit maybe, but decides not to.
So he killed his own Uro and also though.
Well, no, he could have used the Explosion, not the Blast Zone, right? Because the Explosion, he has seven mana available.
Sorry, yep, Explosion, Blast Zone. It all sounds the same to me.
Yeah, it's all blowing stuff up, right?
Yeah, I mean, Brad is just so far ahead right now.
I was going to put this card up on screen, but you're going to have to kind of tilt your head sideways for this one. So.
Oh, good. Oh, we can mimic. Patrick and Cedric did this at one point.
Yeah, it's like every time you draw one of these cards in paper. One of the greatest things about digital is you don't have to turn your head sideways when you draw the card, because like you snap give it away when there's new.
Yeah. Let's see.
For people asking about deck lists and who's playing what, you'll be able to see that on the Stream Decker overlay here momentarily. It'll all be available there. Looks
I
like Brad
appreciate
Nelson
that.
is going to go ahead and take game one. You can also note on the arena interface here, we don't have who's won what games up on the overlay because the arena provides that. So there's no need to provide it. So you'll see the dot next to FF Freak's name there for them winning the first match for us, the first game
Yeah,
of this match.
it looks pretty good here. I mean, both players have a lot of stuff to bring in. Uh, so like, there's these Legion War Bosses for the Jeskai Fires deck. I think you want those. I think you
Yeah.
like have to have them.
Yep. And we were talking about how the Jeskai Fires deck is really good against the aggressive decks because it has a lot of this interaction like Deafening Clarion and stuff game one. And post-board Legion Warboss really allows this deck to assume a little bit of a different role. Allows them to become that beatdown a little bit.
How do you feel about this Narset of the Ancient Way in these decks, in these Jeskai Fires decks?
Now, Narset's an interesting one. It's a card that I've been really underwhelmed by, but at the same time, these decks don't have a ton of hard removal. The big question for me in the Jeskai Fires decks is Narset better than something like, say, Elspeth Conquer's Death that is also a form of hard removal that's rather expensive?
Yeah, that's fair, and it also plays with Karuga. So like, that's the funny part is you have to like, okay, I don't want to play Narset, but I want to play something similar, but it has to fit inside of
Karuga's restriction. Yep.
Yeah.
And the big upside to me for Narset is the little bits of life gain that it can provide.
Yeah.
But like the Fires deck, in my experience with all of its Clarions, is so good against these aggressive decks that like I'm not really sure I buy you need the life gain from Narset. It'll be interesting to see how these decks shake out. Could definitely be depending on how the format is defined, what we want to be playing.
Yeah, I'm like looking through what Brad's up to also, and you know, you mentioned open deck list being a thing. It doesn't look like right now that he assumes that these Legion War Bosses are going to come in, at least with the way he's configured currently.
Yep, yeah, and again, Brad does know about them, but we don't see any of the shocks coming in or the cheap spot removal, although we did see Aether Gust come in.
Yeah, Aether Gust is definitely flexible removal for, not removal, but flexible counterspell for these things. It can be removal too, sort of. So,
probably pretty easy keeps on both sides here.
yeah, it's really slow for the Fires deck, but like, I mean, it's got all the pieces that you want though, so hard to say no.
Yeah, I mean, like, and to be fair, unless you have exactly the War Boss post board, you don't really have super aggressive starts, right? Which is one of the reasons why this matchup is a challenge for the Fires deck, because they need to be the beatdown, but they're not super efficient at actually doing that.
Yeah, that's definitely fair, man. But, you know, a couple running Mystical Disputes in a row is pretty nice, basically what the Doctor ordered for the standard now. We need some lands here.
Okay, do you dispute the Growth Spiral?
No, I think you have to go for the payoffs. I think you just let this ride.
See, I actually kind of like disputing the Growth Spiral here because we see that Fires of Invention in hand for the standard. There's a little bit of value to getting those out of the hand just because, you know, you're not going to be able to use those counterspells really once Fires is down.
See, the one thing I wanted to do is, like, we mentioned being the beatdown. Like, I probably would have tried to stick Brazen Borrower on that end step and then hope to hit, like, either make Brad counter it or hit the fourth lane. And if he does counter it, you can stick Fires after that. So it's tough, though.
That's fair.
Without having the fourth land stuff.
And Brazen Borrower is kind of a tough threat to get through, especially when you're choked on mana, because you know there's a bunch of Mystic Disputes on both sides, and Brad's deck's got the Scatters on top of that.
Yeah, it's super difficult.
Now, the shock here on the Stomping Ground is lets the standard know that something is up, right? Because it's not the third blue source, so Brad's not just shocking to activate this castle. So the standard should know that, like, there's 2 instant speed blue cards here.
Yeah, I would. There's no way I'm sticking Brazen Borrower. I think time's come. Man, that stinks. Now time's come and gone, basically, where you can like sneak in Brazen Borrower or hope to hit. And I mean, Brad's just on 4 counter spells at this point. All right. Probably cycle this Triome off. He doesn't need lands, but
he could kind of use an extra blue source though, right?
That's totally fair too. Looks like Brad's gonna go ahead and
we're gonna see Fibblethip cycle here from our release ready Magic Arena client.
What happened here? What happened?
What's funny is too, it looked like the Fibblethit artwork was like overlaid on the artwork of the Psycholand.
Yeah,
So I was like,
yeah.
what happened there?
Man, this is tough here. I probably just like start jamming. You have so many 4-drops. You have 4 4-drops. I just probably start jamming into these counter spells. It doesn't feel great, but like
I
whatever.
think I might pass here and like end step Borrower with Dispute up, and then like hope Brad picks a fight there, and then like untap and try and fires, just like try and force through.
I mean, that's also fair.
Yeah, I like the standards line here. They're a little bit behind because of their variance from their missed land drops, but I feel like they're doing ooh, no Borrower play. Okay, I would have tried to stick the Borrower there, I think.
Basic planes, nice, perfect.
And this Fires of Invention, waiting for the Fires of Invention until you have Dispute up here feels strange to me because like Dispute's not countering any of Brad's counters at this point, right?
Ever, never, not anymore. Not the rest of the game, basically. Like
Yeah.
Brad's ahead on mana. He's ahead on cards, basically at this point. I mean, if Brad's not doing anything, you know his hand's just stacked full of counter spells or explosions.
I feel like you're actually kind of excited to get Aether Gusted here. You just like can't bottom
Yeah,
this Fires fast enough.
yeah, whatever. Get rid of it. We need
Just
lands.
like you got plenty of those. Don't need that one.
Yep. And they have declined. Yep, the standard has declined, so that goes to the bottom.
Yep, we see Nightpack Ambusher added to Nelson's hand here. Gonna see him getting a little bit excited with that Nightpack Ambusher, ready to jam that one into play as soon as he gets the
Yeah,
available opportunity.
yeah, that is rough. And you know what's? Yeah, that's pretty rough. Oof.
And this is,
And Brad has.
we talk about how Brad's the go bigger deck, but Nightpack Ambusher is really a card that can let him kind of pressure and close this game out, right?
Yeah, Nightpack Ambusher is a nice addition to these decks. You know, they can't sit around and do nothing. Sometimes they can't sit around and do nothing. They want to play this game out. Nightpack Ambusher does that better than basically any card they have access to.
Yep, and we see Nightpack Ambusher just get jammed here at the end of turn for Brad. I think you notice Aether Gust is probably the only thing out of the Fires deck that could answer this here, and even if it does get Aether Gusted, that's not a permanent answer, right? He's going to get to redraw the Nightpack Ambusher and try again next turn.
Yeah, for sure. Like, I mean, he knows Brazen Borrower also is a way to, like, kind of tempo him a little bit. I mean, you got to do it here. You can't let this card beat you down.
Yeah, and like, okay, so that's Reclamation. I think
Wait.
I think we're heading into garbage time here.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mentioned if Brad's sitting around doing nothing, he probably has a ton of counter spells, and Brad has 3 currently. He also has an expansion if he wants one.
Yep.
So, they pick Ambusher coming down. It's really tough for the standard. I thought they had like the tools to do stuff, and then just bricked on lands a little bit too long.
Yep, and we're going to have Brazen Borrower try to happen here, but there's both a Dispute and the Negate in Brad's hand here. I kind of expect to see Dispute happen, just because that card's going to draw dead here shortly. Yep, fire that right on off.
Get disputed.
A couple folks in chat
Everyone's
asking
gonna
about the
unstep.
round timer, something to be familiar with. You'll see both players have a couple of timeouts saved up here. The actual individual timers don't pop up for players on Arena until they're short on time.
Yeah, this is what I was talking about here. The expansion actually is going to be able to help Brad power through on the stack here. It looks like, just based on what we see.
And one of the things that's going to be interesting to see as the format develops here is, like, remember, while Ikoria has a lot of new interesting cards in it here, both of these decks that we're seeing play at the moment are kind of upgrades from decks from last season, right? So like the newer cards really have to prove themselves if they can establish new archetypes or if they're just going to slot into other things that already existed.
Yeah, a lot of times it's better just to like iterate upon archetypes like this. I mean, this Jeskai Fires deck that was like the best deck for a long time now, and it just got a little bit of boost, and I mean, it's still great. So. Yeah, and Brad's just going to start chipping away here. A couple more turns, and this one's done.
Yeah, we see the wolf hitting the battlefield here from the Nightpack Ambusher.
Actually,
Brad floating a bunch of mana. Are we going to see an expansion explosion here, or are we just going to scry a little bit? We might see an expansion explosion for just a little bit while we can play around counter spells. Yeah, I like this from Brad. Looks like we're going to see it for 4.
Yep, I'm into it. Refuels the hand a little bit, and
This is some of the power of the Reclamation deck. Like, this is an expansion explosion. The explosion's not winning the game, but it's winning the game, right?
Yeah, for sure. So this is kind of interesting. The standard has a way to get back in the game at this point, though.
Yeah. I
This
mean, like,
Narset
if this
is gonna do some stuff.
if this explosion happens and Brad draws a couple cards, I think you probably dispute it just to tap Brad out, and then next turn you
Yeah,
like
definitely.
get a chance to do stuff with your mana and like hope your Cavalier does something. I guess.
Yep. It's gonna be for 5. I mean,
Yeah, easy pay there, and then
yeah.
5 damage is going to happen. Brad's down to 5 and pick up a whole bunch of cards.
And they don't really do anything, those cards, though.
Yep, they don't
This,
impact the board once Nelson's able, or once the standard's able to get something on the board here. So we're gonna get to see Narset.
yeah,
Narset like trades for the Nightpack Ambusher here, basically. But we're gonna
I
see
think
the
that's fine.
we're gonna see the real cost to Narset though, because the cost of trading for the Nightpack Ambusher is you're also trading card quality, right? Like we see Narset draw a land there, but then bin a good spell in order to kill this creature.
Yeah, it's totally valid.
And that's one of the tough things about this card from my perspective. Like, imagine if this Narset had been an Elspeth Conqueror's Death in this position.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. The bad part here for the standard is Brad has like these 2 Essence Scatters
Yep.
in hand, so the next 2 creatures are covered.
Correct. Yeah, like, I mean, the standard is at 5, and like this wolf is a very real clock with only 5 life on the standard side of the board.
Yeah, the Wolf Brad has a couple of Castle Vantress to set up his next several draw steps. I mean, Brad's still in really great shape. There just was a small window where the standard might have been able to get out of it here, but I think the door's closing.
Yep. We see the Castle Vantress here on Brad's side of the table. One of those lands that really lets you leverage your Wilderness Reclamations even when you don't have a payoff spell for it.
Yep, definitely a nice addition to these decks. Can't leave home without these. I mean, you get in these spots where Brad is, where like most of his cards in hands are kind of nonsense at this point. Uh, you know, so he needs to find some business, and Castle Venture is certainly going to help there.
Correct. Yeah, like his hand's not good, but he's going to get to scry 2 a whole bunch of times here. Can
Yeah,
switch
he's
over.
scryed 6 cards. He would have scryed 8 total cards.
Yeah, put every card on the bottom of his deck there. Let's go ahead and flip over to his side of the board so we can take a look at his scries moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how. Pretty impossible to 2-spell a turn, and like these scatters are just going to be complete beatings.
Yep.
So Brad's not going to have the option to Vantress again, but
Yep. And looks like the standard's going to go ahead and pack it in there, kind of seeing the writing on the wall, not going to be able to get through this wall of interaction before the wolf ends the game.
Yeah, it was an interesting game. Both of them are pretty interesting, honestly. And unfortunately for the standard, they never drew the 4th land until I think it was like turn 6 or 7, maybe.
Yep.
And they also never drew like their powerful sideboard cards that Brad might not have been able to deal with, like Legion War Boss. So.
Yep, and I think that matchup kind of went the way we expected it to play out. I think the Fires deck needs to roll a little bit high on average to be successful in a matchup like that, and we saw them run a little bit below average, which is not going to be enough to win a tough matchup.
Yeah, if you don't put them in the dirt like rather early, they just go so far over the top. I mean, Brad was at 18. It's probably like turn 10 or 12 of the game, something like that, and you just that's not good for anybody in the matchup.
All right, I'm gonna see if we can get another match here. We'll be back in just a second. Hopefully, some more Magic. Thanks for hanging out today, everyone. Don't go anywhere. We've got a bunch more Magic coming up here today.
We assure you we are